Beneath its wings of love abide, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. Through days of toil when heart doth fail, God will take care of you. When dangers fierce your path assail, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you.
A reading from the Gospel according to John, chapter 14 and verse 1. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. On Monday, the 27th of April, I was in a class at about 9:30. And at the beginning of the class, the lecturer decided, given the circumstances that's going on now, he would like to begin with a devotion. And in his devotion, we sang, Guide Me, O Thou Great Redeemer. And following the hymn, of course, all over Zoom, the lecturer decided to read this particular scripture, but he read verses 1 to 13. And at the end of the reading, he asked us to just share briefly what this reading means for us and how this reading may have stood out to us. And I was hesitant to go at first, and so I mulled over it and I thought about it. And the words from verse 1 stood out to me. Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. And my original thoughts that I shared with the class was that in this current time, with this current pandemic, there is a lot of noise in the market. You turn on your TV and the various news stations are flooded with updates on the daily number of confirmed COVID cases in Europe, in North America, and in many instances in our home countries. A lot of times they flood with the amount of deaths that have taken place. Some would promote the amount of recoveries that have taken place. And persons who are considered experts in the areas of economics and finance, they are invited to share their thoughts on what's going to happen to the economy and what's going to happen to our sustainability, and particularly in the Caribbean. And a lot of times, and for a lot of people, it can become very overwhelming because it seems that no matter where you turn, you go on Facebook, there are reports, there are pictures, there are snippets of news stories concerning COVID-19. You turn on your TVs, you get on the phone and you speak to people, and you can't even ask them, well, how are you doing? Because the reality is most, if not all of us, are in the same predicament, confined to our homes. And it's as if no matter where you turn, no matter what facet of life you look at, everything is impacted in some way or the other by this pandemic. And for me, do not let your hearts be troubled. In my original thoughts, what I shared is that despite all of this, God is going to take care of us. And so we must not let our hearts be troubled. And that was the extent of my sharing. But after I had shared and after the class had ended, I pondered on this idea some more. And I said, what does it really mean to not let our hearts be troubled despite everything that we see and hear about this pandemic? Do we remain calm and trust that God will divert this particular storm? Do we remain calm that God will divert the economic fallout? That God will divert the unemployment that is likely to follow? That God will divert the backlash, the unforeseen circumstances? Is that what we mean when we say, do not let our hearts be troubled? You see, I want to go a bit further because while we can mean that, I think we have to pause and understand that sometimes it also means remaining calm, not because God will divert the storm, but remaining calm in the midst of the storm. In other words, economic fallout is likely to happen. There will be unemployment. Once this is all over in whatever shape or form overtakes, because there's going to be a phased reopening in many if not all countries, so normal as it were will not resume immediately but in phases. And so when as that takes place, there's going to be some kind of ramifications. The economy may not open up right away. For a lot of us in Caribbean countries, our borders may not open up right away. There still may be one or two persons in our respective homes that don't go back to work right away. The cost of things may continue to go up. Eventually, all of the restrictions on bills and debt, they will be lifted, and persons will be expected to honor the bills and debts that are before them. But we are still admonished to not let our hearts be troubled. Because though these storms may not necessarily be diverted in the way that we think they should or would be, we have to trust the power of God to keep us in the midst of our storms. You see, my friends and my family, a lot of times we measure the power of God by His ability to turn a situation away, to divert a challenge, to divert a problem. When in actuality, the power of God is not measured by Him turning away, but by Him sustaining us. That even in the midst of what is sure to follow, and I don't mean to jump on the pessimistic bandwagon, the reality is there will be some negative ramifications, but even in the midst of those that will follow this particular pandemic, God will take care of us. God will sustain us. He will keep us. No economic fallout will be too great for our respective countries to overcome. Though our homes may be plagued by some form of the or the other of unemployment, our cupboards will not run empty. Though there will be some degree of paranoia in what is going to be the new normal, and though life may not return to what it once was immediately, and it will require a lot of adjustments even after we are allowed to move about unrestricted, and that is sure to bring some psychological duress, God will still sustain us. He will give us a peace that passes all understanding. Because you see, there is nothing that is too hard for God. Yes, we must take care of ourselves, and and remove ourselves from listening to so much of the negativity that surrounds this current pandemic, but we must also trust that when these realities materialize, God will take care of us. I remind you of some of the words from the epistle for morning prayer, Colossians chapter 1 and verses 11 to 12. It says, "May you be made strong with all the strength that comes from His glorious power. And may you be prepared to endure everything with patience, while joyfully giving thanks to the Father who has enabled you to share in the inheritance of the saints in light." My family, in other words, you will experience something. You will have your challenges from this experience, no doubt. But with the power of God, we are made strong. We are given endurance and patience so that as we go through this experience, we can still joyfully give thanks to the Father, because we know that God will take care of us. Amen.
God will take care of you. Nothing you ask will be denied. God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will take care of you. God will take care of you. No matter what may be the test, God will take care of you. Lean weary one upon His breast, God will take care of you. God will take care of you through every day or all the way. He will